Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I am the streamer for this stream, and we work on a Django application that I am building. We'll get into the project here and just jump right into things. I'm working on an onboarding process for my application, which is all about providing tools for homeschool families to help them manage their schedule and courses and activities and all the things that go into doing that for a homeschool group. And I'm doing that because we homeschool here at my house. So it's a tool that I hope to use for my family and then be able to share with others as I get more. Before we get into the code, there are ways to keep up with me that you can find. There's a URL to a website above at mattlehman.com. You can follow my mailing list if that's your thing. I'm also on Twitter as MBLehman and have other presence on YouTube where I upload these videos after a stream. So if there's anything that you want to catch up on or don't have time to see now or miss something, you're welcome to do that as well. And just search for Matt Lehman on YouTube and I should turn up. Additionally, I have a Patreon. So if you're finding this to be valuable and valuable enough where you want to throw a few dollars my way and support me in my endeavor, you can go to patreon.com/mblehman and find me there. And finally, there is a Discord that's linked below. So if you have specific questions about Django that don't fit in a tweet, I'm happy to answer those at Discord. So with that out of the way, let's go and look at some code. We've been working on this process of making my onboarding a more complete experience so that we walk a new homeschool teacher through all of the steps of getting them to success for a minimal amount of work for their class. And let's look at see what that looks like so you have a good feel for it, and we'll get to the next step in the flow. Essentially, my onboarding process is like a 5-step process that walks you through the creation of some of the core models that are part of the application. And we have been working through the first couple of pieces, and I'll open up the models that I have. I have a diagram that is generated by a tool that shows all of my Django models, so you can see what data we're working with. So we've already done this step of creating a school year. School year is the sort of the top model that goes into the system, and it functions like a tree. So a school year might have multiple grade levels. So if you have multiple students in your household, then you could have a grade level for each of them, or they could share a grade level if they're twins or something like that. But that's the next step, and that is what we will probably be working on today, the form for that. And if we have time, we'll continue on to the next piece of that, which is over in this direction. So the hierarchy is school year, grade level, then a course. And then finally, under the course, there are tasks, which is the last step of the onboarding process. So if we look at our onboarding sequence, the way I'm structuring this is to have this navigation bar that is going to guide a user through each of the steps and have pros to go along with the steps to tell them what this different data is for. And that kind of gently introduces them to the data that's in the system and also gives them the opportunity to create their first version of their first school year, their first grade level, their first course, and so on. So last time we're working on improving this because there's continuity between these steps. If you have the need to make a grade level, you first have to create a school year. So we were switching this code up so that it would check for the prerequisite data that's needed for each piece of this. And if the stuff is not there, it gives them a message that says, hey, you need to go back a step. Or in the case of where they have already done it, it says, hey, you need to go on to the next step. And so we're linking things together that way. So where we're at this point, I think, is powering the GradeLevel form, I think. That's where I left it off. I added a little bit of copy that it makes more sense for this. I just put something notional in place last time, and after the stream was over, I fleshed it out with something that I thought was a bit more realistic for that. So this is meant to be an open educational channel. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask your questions in the chat. And let's try and keep it scoped to Django, Python, or web development. I think that's probably what I'll be best equipped to answer to stay kind of on topic. But the chat is open, and as long as you're not a jerk, which most people are really nice, I'm happy to share what I know with you. So we've got this page, and we need to flesh it out. And honestly, I don't quite remember where I left off last time, so we'll have to stare at it a little bit before we can get up to speed. And, whoops, where am I going? I'm going to the core views file. And we have this this view right here is the one that we need to work on next. Okay, so I don't actually know if I left off with a test that we needed to do. I didn't really give myself good breadcrumbs on this, so I apologize as I stumble through this a little bit, but that's sort of what happens with code sometimes. You get into it, you're maybe a little cold on where it is, and you got to figure out, what was I doing again? So we've got these set of tests that test the OK path, test that the user is authenticated, and test that some data is available to the view. And we added a grade level and a school year to the view. Those are the two things that we need to check. And if we have a grade level for this particular form, then the user's done. They can go on to the next thing. If we don't have a grade level, but we have a school year, then we should show the form that is helping them create the grade level object. And if we don't have a school year, that's what when we kick them back to the previous step in the process. So if we look at the start grade level template, I think I'm getting my head in place now. Let's close the test for a minute, and let's close the other file for a minute. I did put myself a little note in here about what to do next. This is where I left off, was in the form, and I didn't even realize it. So we've got this if and else if statement, and then there's an else clause as at the bottom here in the template. So this line, and then the two lines above it, and those kind of indicate what the steps are. So this first block, and the order of this is important because it's about which data is going to be completed. So if grade level is there, move them on. If they're in that middle phase, so if the school year is there, show them the form. And if they're not even at that stage, then show them the you need to go back form. That's what's going on. And I think I've already finished a lot of the form itself. It's a nice short form. It really only needs to capture whatever they want to use as a name for this form. So that's nice. And I need to plug in some additional data here. So this is where I have this HTML comment that I need to change to be something different. So I copied this from a previous form, which is why it's asking for the school, because the school is what is a necessary piece of data that goes into the school year. Now, though, we are one level lower in the hierarchy, and the school is not needed. That's already captured in the school year, but we do have a foreign key reference that we need for the grade level. But since we are already in this context of knowing that school year is available, what I can do is change this hidden input field to use school year instead of school, and we'll change it to be schoolyear.id. So what that'll do is put the primary key of the school year in there. And we're going to write a Django model form, and that model form is going to expect the primary key. And we'll do some extra validation too to make sure that that is a school year that we're actually allowed to add to, but that'll be part of the form process. So we need the data of the school year, and then the other piece that goes into this grade level is a name, which is a character field. So we also have a field that I've copied from the other form as well that has all of the attributes of name and the error handling and all this extra stuff that kind of goes in here. At some point in the future, I will probably refactor this form to pull these chunks out into be something more reusable, but I haven't fully decided on the patterns yet, so I don't want to do that prematurely. So we've got our hidden school year field. We've got our name field, which is the required element here, and I think that got messed up when I changed a value there, so I'm going to fix that indentation. And I already set some placeholder text that is meaningful for this context so that someone can understand what kind of data they're supposed to put in here. And I think that's it for the template. So if we look over here, you can see what this looks like, and I'll actually refresh this page. So we have an autofocus set, so it drops them right into the form. I like to do that as like a little way to help somebody it brings their focus to this is the thing that you need to fill out. And I think there might be some slight accessibility issues with using autofocus. I can't remember, but for my purposes here, I think this is a useful way to direct user and make it so that they can get on board as quickly as possible. Because part of what you want to do in an onboarding flow is lower the bar as low as you can go and keep as much clarity in purpose here. So we've got some visual steps to guide people along to saying this is what you're doing. There's descriptive text to really guide them in detail on this particular step. And then there's just this very short form, which is put right in front of their face of saying, just tell us what your thing is. To the point where if they wanted to, they could type in their name and tab to the next button to actually even submit it. So the best case scenario, this is coming from someone who's I think like a power user for doing programming and stuff, is to keep off the mouse as much as possible. Allow people to tab complete, because if you make this stuff as accessible as you can, it just helps everybody. It just provides a better user experience, and it's just something good to do, I think. So I think our template is done at this stage, and we need to move on to the code that's going to power a lot of this. So we'll set this aside, and we'll go back to the views file, and it's going to be a lot of the similar stuff that we had in the previous view. The nice part of this onboarding is this is not complex rocket science here. We're going through some simple forms that set up some basic data, and then we're going to let people run loose. And I have thoughts about, well, what do we do? What signals the end of onboarding? And I'm not positive yet, but I'll share more on that later. We've got our context. So we need to say that where do you go when this grade level form is successful? I think the place that we want to go is to the next step, which is the course form. So we're going to take this success URL stuff, and we'll put it here. And change from start grade level to start course is, I believe, what I called the other view. To confirm that, let's check the URLs file, which has them all defined. Yeah, it's a start course view. So that's the next step in the flow. And we'll also bring up the test views file so that we can actually test this, because that's the thing that will be the meaningful success scenario. So what I'm going to do before doing anything else is give ourselves a test that we can copy from. And I'm going to copy the style that's already set out for me, because a lot of this is duplication of what is needed. So we have a valid submission test, and we're going to change things a little bit now. We're going to need a school year for this test, because remember, it's deeper in this flow. So I will use my school year factory, if I could type, school year factory. There it is. And the school is it has to be one that's associated with the user. So we say user.school because that's a property that I've added to the user model. So that should make one an appropriate school year. And now in the data, we can provide the school year ID. And we'll change the other data. We'll say it has to be a name field, if you recall. And I'll use kindergarten because it's a good, meaningful name that is nicer than 5th grade. I don't know. And this will be a post to the grade level endpoint with the data. So when we're done, we want to assert what? We want to assert that there is a grade level that has that school year associated with it. So we'll do grade level .objects .filter, and we're going to do school year is equal to school year. We'll do the count of that, and we'll say 1. Okay, and to check the actual success part of this, we'll change this to course. And I also need to do an import of the grade level, which is in the schools app. All right, so that's a test. This test should fail right now because we've not actually connected a form. Right now, you look at this view, it's a template view. It's not actually a form view yet. So it's not going to know how to handle a post. And it's asserting that the count doesn't match, but if I switch this around and put the redirect stuff, it's probably going to be a 405? Yeah, because a 405 is the, that's an HTTP status code for method not implemented, I think. Method not allowed. So if you do a post and you have a class-based view, and you don't define the right methods on that class-based view, then Django will just by default reject that request and say like, hey, I can't handle this kind of HTTP request. So here's a 405 saying, no, I'm not going to do that. So that's why that was a 405. I'll put it back in the other order for a moment. So we need to change this. We need to change it from a template view that it was to be a create view, because we're going to be creating a record. So we'll change it to a create view, and we'll run the test again. The nice part about having a test, particularly an automated test, you can have lots of tests that are manual that are still slow. But the nice part about having a quick automated test is exactly that. It's quick. So I can get a very fast feedback loop. In fact, I've taken the steps to integrate my test execution with my code editor. So I'm using Vim here, and Vim has shortcut options just like anything else. So by hitting a couple of keystrokes, in my case, spacebar T, I can run my test immediately. And so that gives me that feedback loop of I can make a very small change and then run the test that's associated with the code and just stay in my editor the whole time, get the feedback, and get moving. So that's something that if you're new to development and you're new to automated testing, those are two things that I would strongly recommend people look into, is finding ways to get test execution into the way that you do development, because it will make you dramatically faster. And especially to get it also into your code editor. I used to have a setup where I had my code editor, Vim. I still use Vim at the time, but I had my test execution running in a separate terminal. And so in order to even run the right test, I would either have the choice of running the whole suite, which could be slow, or I would have to do something like, let's say my test command was called test. It's made up, but I'd have to say test and then find the right directory of core, core. Oh, I tabbed, incompleted it wrong. Test views, and I hope that you get the idea of it's relatively slow. It's still faster than a manual test, probably in a lot of cases, but it certainly isn't as fast as 2 keystrokes and you've got a running test. So there's just a tip for folks out there. Okay, so we've got the right data for the test. It's setting the right things, but our actual view is wrong. If you read the error message on the failing test, it says improperly configured. Start grade level view is missing a query set. So there are a few ways that you can do this. You can define a model, define a query set, or override get query set. We're actually going to take option 3, which is, or I guess option 4, which is none of those, because we want to define a custom form for this, because I want to add some validation that we're going to do. So the way to do that is with the form class attribute, like you can see here. And we'll say form class. And this is going to be a grade level form, which doesn't exist yet. So we're going to create that. The grade level model is defined in the schools app. So I'm going to put the form for it in the schools forms module. We do this by saying grade level form. And that makes the imports happy. But if I run that same test again, it'll have an import error because it doesn't exist. So to correct that, we'll go to the schools forms file, and we're going to add a new form. I like to put stuff alphabetically just because I'm a weirdo like that. We'll have our grade level form, and it's going to be a model form. And model forms, they're pretty smart. They inspect attributes of the model itself to determine what fields you can define, and it makes it so that you don't have to define a lot about your form. If you work with Django and work with the standard forms, then you have to be explicit about the form's attributes. And that's fine if you don't have a model to connect it to. And sometimes you want to use explicit forms because you're doing other things with the data. But the model form is for these cases where you're directly trying to create a record associated with a particular model. In this case, we're working with our grade level model, and the fields that we want on this, not fields, fields are the school year and the name. And I'm gonna, I'll leave it like that. School year and name. School year is the foreign key that we need, or it's the foreign key relationship that we have to satisfy, and the name is the name of the grade level. We need to import that model to make it all happy. And so this might work right now, that test. Nope, didn't work. Why did you not work? That's a good question. Now I'm confused. So we set grade level form. We put it on our grade level view. We set our form class. We set the success URL. Maybe there was an error on the page. Okay, let's go back and check the model. Is there anything I'm missing? We have school year. And, oh, there it is. I forgot to change the data, the key that it expected. So it expects a expects the form to use school year and not school. Okay, now I feel better. So this is a working view at this point, but there is a problem with this. And actually the subject came up on the Django forum. Someone was asking about, what do you do when you are using create view and you need to connect to other records? How can you do that? Here it is, automatically setting foreign key. And so there are a couple of strategies listed here. The other one is listed by Ken Whitesell. And I proposed a technique, which I'm describing here. But essentially what I did was use a hidden field. That's what we saw in that template a moment ago. And the hidden field had the school year ID in it, if you recall. That's right here. School year has a hidden attribute on the type, or a hidden type attribute, and the value is the school year ID, which we know is put in the context. So there's a problem right now, though, and the problem is this: as it's written, this offers no protection. So if you are somebody else and you're being nefarious, or you're just poking around and trying to see what you can get away with, might not even be malicious perhaps, it would be possible to, in its current state, add a grade level to somebody else's school year record. And since I'm using primary keys, you could do it in a loop and add them to all the school years. So you could really mess a lot of stuff up. So in order to protect against that, what we have to do is add some cleaning to the form. And that cleaning is going to validate that the data that's in there is actually allowed. And you can see I did this on this other school year form where I added the user, and then once the user was in there in a clean method, I could get some attributes from that person. And we're going to do the same thing here. So the thing we need to do is basically exactly this. But before I do that, I want to write the test that proves that. And so let's copy this particular test, or maybe, well, here's the idea behind this test. And what I really care about is this chunk down here is the actual assertions for that form. So we'll paste that there for a moment, and then we'll copy this stuff, this part, and put it here. So we have two of them, and we'll change the name of the method to be test only school year for user. That's the only kind that someone can submit to this form. So this doesn't change, and well, it does change. So the difference is now, rather than connect it with this user's school year, we need to take this out. And what the effect of that is that the factory, I used Factory Boy, which makes model instances into the database. And when it can't satisfy a foreign key, it uses another factory to create that. So the fact that I haven't supplied a school object to go into this factory means that when this thing creates, it says, I don't have a school, so I need to go create a school. And when it creates a school, it says, I don't have a user, so I need to go create a user. So by leaving this empty, I'm essentially saying, make a school year for some other random user. It doesn't really matter. That's the effect. So now we've got the same exact rest of the data, and the problem is that this stuff, like this, it will still create a grade level object right now. So if I comment out this part like that, this test should pass, I think, and it does. And we don't want it to pass, because that's exactly the case we were trying to guard against, where a user can't make a grade level for somebody else's school year. So we want to, what do we want to do? In fact, we might even want to have an extra assertion here that says that this is 0, just to confirm. I don't know that that's truly necessary because we're going to have a form error. So I might delete this, but it'd be a good first test to see that. So we've got our test, and now it fails properly because now there's a grade level when there shouldn't be, and we're stating that in our assertion. So we'll come over here, and we will, I'm going to use the same technique that I used on the previous form, which is adding a user to the model, or to the form, excuse me. And then we're going to use that in the clean method. So in order to make this work, though, we need to take this same function, which getForm keyword args adds whatever you want to the keyword arguments that are passed into the init. So that's why here's the init's keyword args. So this keyword args here, which I'm on in this forms file, matches up with this keyword args that is returned, which is why we are connecting the 2 dots here. So I'm going to take this method and I'm going to add it to this same file. So now we have a user that gets added to the form, and we have the user available to the form. Still going to fail though, because we haven't done anything with the user yet. So we need to say, we need to now write a clean method. We'll continue to follow the pattern that's here, just because it's convenient, and we'll start from with that and say this is where stuff is going to change. So now instead of a school, we're going to say a school year. And so because this is a model form and it knows it's a foreign key, it's actually going to try and resolve that to an actual school year record. And if it can't, it will return back as none, I believe. So that's important to remember sometimes, which is why instead of viewing, this is kind of like a dictionary, and that's why I'm using get instead of using the actual square brackets, because the cleaned version, it will only exist in the clean version if it was able to get a record, I believe is the case. And we don't care about this particular validation check that was only specific to the school year. So really we need to have a validation here, and this if clause is going to be the condition that we care about, but it doesn't match up here. So we want to see, what do we want to check? We want to check if the, so if school year, I think, and school year dot objects, yeah, I think this will be right. We want to filter, and I want to use this school year primary, the ID, as one filter. And the other filter that I want to use is the school year, or the school itself. So we can say, actually we don't even need to say the school, we can do the user of the school's user that is associated with the school. So that we can do self.user. And then we want to check if that exists. So really what we've done is actually the opposite condition from what we really care about. So we want to say if the school year and if this does not exist. And then I need to make it valid Python. For the moment, let's delete that and just have that as a validation. So here's the logic behind this. The school year may come back as none. So we have to, before we can even try and access the ID, we have to check that the school year is actually there. If it's not, it's going to, there's a bug. So if the school year is not there, we want to raise that as a validation error. Is that right? That's probably right. So there's going to be another if check here. So if not school year, raise forms validation error. And I don't know that I want to check that one. Maybe I do. Oh, I probably want good coverage. So we'll come back to that message in a minute. And we'll just call it invalid school year. These are cases that the average person who is using the app as I intend them to, that's what I'm trying to say, will never hit. But these are trying to protect the app against people that are just poking at it, or automated tools that might poke at it at some point in the future. I don't think anything would, but you never know. So we've got one check that is going to act as a guard and kick out a validation error if there's no school year, because that's definitely not going to be valid to save. And then our next one is going to check when there is no school year, when the school year is not associated with the user. Or, maybe better than that. I'm trying to decide if this query is the right query, because the other thing that we could do is this would also work if school year dot school is equal to self dot user dot school. And that would work. But I don't think I'm going to do that. And the reason I'm not going to do that is because it will actually be two queries. So let's think about this. When the school year record is fetched, it's just fetching that one data. It's not joining to get together with anything. When you do an attribute lookup like this on something that is a foreign key relationship, that you should read this as, because this is another model, that's doing a query if it hadn't already fetched it. So there's one query right here to get the school. And the user has this school property that I've defined. That happens to be, because I know it's another query. In fact, let's just look at the models file so you can see it and I can prove it. So it's doing another query. It's taking the school set and getting the latest. And frankly, as far as I envision this app, a user will only ever be associated with one school. So it's basically like a one-to-one relationship, but I didn't want to model it that way. But it doesn't matter. That's a second query is the point. So this is two queries in order to check for equality. In contrast, this right here is a single query. So we're taking the ID from the school year, which has already been retrieved from the database. So there's not an additional query there. And then we're checking it against the user. And there's some joining going on here in order to make that happen. So, the query is not super efficient, I guess, but it's a single query, and usually one query is better than two. So I'm going to delete this version of it. So that those two are logically equivalent, and the other one is arguably simpler looking. And I would agree, but it's a little bit less efficient. And so maybe I'm over optimizing, I don't know, but I think I'm going to stick with what I got. So if these don't match, or if there's no match here, if the ID is not belonging to the user, then it's not a valid school year. So we need to change this message to a grade level cannot be created for a different school year. What I want to say. So that's the right validation there. And coming back up here, now I think this test should pass. Oops. Cannot query test user, must be a school instance. What did I do? School user. Okay, school year. Did I call? Oh, I might have called it something different on this. It might be admin. Okay. The school model is named slightly differently, I believe. Let's look at that model. Yeah, on the school, I name the person, the foreign key relationship. I called it admin because that seemed to be more sensible. So I think this is going to work now. Okay, good, it does. So it didn't create the grade level, which is exactly what we want. What we really want is to have a 200 response. We want all this stuff. We want a 200 response, so that's reloading the form, but we want the field errors to be there, and we want to read the message out of that. This will fail because the message doesn't match what we just changed it to, because ours is about grade levels now, not school years. We can change that to be a grade level cannot be created for a different school year. And that message is not actually even right. It's not. The problem is not just a school year, because in this system, there can be multiple school years. So this message doesn't make sense for that. So to be more precise in my terms, I'm going to say a different user's school year. That feels more correct to me. Oops. Okay. So now the test still passes, and we have an error. So now we have the confidence that there's an error message there. And if we look at the actual template, the non-field errors are rendered here. So if that error message did somehow happen and somebody was like manipulating data and were on this page, they could see this error message display properly. I don't expect that to happen to basically anybody, but we have our bases covered. So I believe that gets the entire view, but it doesn't touch. There's no test coverage for this line, and I don't have perfect test coverage on this application, but the coverage is pretty decent. There's only a few lines that are missing, and so that line was line 18 on the school's forms, and yeah, it's saying right there that line 18 is missing. So we're going to add one test for when you have a just junk school altogether, and that should make it so that this comes back with a none, and we'll hit this different validation problem. So we'll take this test, and it's less important, so I'm going to put after the one we just did, and we'll say, we'll call it test. This will be a bogus school year. So we don't even need a school year record. I think I want to test against, well, one that should be safe should be primary key of 0. Is the way the numbering works on primary keys is they start at 1 and go up, but 0 is still a valid number, so I don't think it'll blow up right away. And if we try this, the message, all the rest of the stuff should be the same, but the message should be different. Yeah, invalid school year. That's the message we wanted to see. We'll change this to invalid school year. And run the whole file. See how it does. Okay. So all those tests are passing. Great. And I think that completes that particular form. So I think we're ready to move on. Well, before I move on, let's clean up this stuff a little bit, and also sometimes I like to, especially because I'm doing this as a solo project, I like to take the opportunity to look at the code diff and see if it all makes sense. And so that's a good exercise to get into, especially if you're working on your own, just to check your code. Again, you write things and you don't always remember what you wrote. Maybe it's a while and you left something in there. I don't know how many times I've caught myself leaving a print statement in stuff. And so we'll take a look. So I added this new view, start view. So that's going to be for the next one that we do. But I needed it in order to connect the grade level to its final destination. So even though it's a junk view right now, it's okay that it exists. And we have our import, and I renamed the test case file, and we added all of our tests. So we checked that it's unauthenticated. The unauthenticated people can't get in. We checked that the default scenario is to render a 200 response. We checked that the context has some pieces of data that are needed in it because the template does some conditional logic on what it displays depending on that. And we checked a valid submission state. And then we checked 2 invalid submission states that are protecting users from other people tampering with data. And then the view itself is not terribly long. It adds the GradeLevel form and grade level and modifies from being a simple template view to having this context data, a success URL, and these keyword arguments. And then we've got our junk course view at the moment. And then here's our form, which has that clean logic that we talked through. What did I do here? Oh, I changed the banner so that the button actually clicks to the right place, because the banner has like placeholders in it temporarily. That's interesting. In fact, why is that doing that? My flux, this is red, but it's not showing any error message. What happened there? I don't think I clicked anything. Okay. Testing. Maybe I wasn't logged in, and I'm not sure what happened. Okay. Not sure what that was about. Okay. It's still looking good. Oh, I was over here for a reason. I was going to show the buttons. So the button, if you look in the lower left corner of my browser, you can see that it says start course right now. But if you look at this one, you can see it says start school year. It's because I haven't made this view yet, so it doesn't know where to link to. But I wanted to have some kind of link as a placeholder. So that's what's getting corrected here. And changed the layout of some of the copy on this to something that I liked better. We're going to add all of these files, and we'll say add the onboarding GradeLevel Form. So we're like 3/5 of the way done now, which is cool. Let's go back to the issues that's on GitHub and see if I actually checked all this stuff off. So we've got the URL. We check that the school year exists. We check that the grade level exists. We ask for a name. I have copy to explain why a grade level is necessary, and a next button. Go to the next one, right? Yeah, I don't call it next, but create grade level. So that's all well and good, which means that 68 is done. So we'll say fixes number 68. Cool. And if you have any questions, I'll take a moment to pause if anybody wants to chime in and have questions about that. The next step that I'm planning to do is continue on into the fourth step in this, but I'll pause for a minute and drink some water. And if you have any thoughts, let me know. Okay. We have our next page. Let's go back to our models diagram. So process is going to continue on as is. I'm going to assume that someone wants to add a course to the grade level that they just created. So I'm going to pick the first grade level as the data that's going to go into this form. And all the rest of the stuff that's here, this isn't a super clear picture. I've got this blown up and it starts to pixelate, and that might get even worse on Twitch, I don't know. But this has an ID field that's going to be auto-generated. The grade level is the thing that we're going to populate from hidden data, just like before. And we're going to add a name. That's going to be science, biology, whatever they want. And these other two fields, days of week and UUID, are two things that have defaults. And again, onboarding is all about keeping things as simple as possible. So no one's ever going to set UUID. That's an identifier that is uniquely generated. It's super long to be random and basically impossible to guess. The other thing that eventually a user may want to set is the days of the week. And the idea behind the days of the week is a course can run on different days. So it defaults to Monday through Friday, which is a standard school week, at least in the States. I don't know if it's different elsewhere, but in the United States, schools usually run during the work week of Monday to Friday. So I've got that as the default here. In the creation process, they won't get any options. And then when they go later and decide, you know what, hey, my music class or my art class only meets a couple times a week because it's more of an elective and not a core course, then they'll be able to modify that and select the days. But that's not a detail that I want to expose users to at the introductory stage. So we will leave that off and let it assume the default data. So again, this form is basically just like the one that we just did. It's just a different name, and it's going to go to a different model. So it's a lot of the same steps of making sure that there's data in the context, that the template knows how to react to that data to point to each direction, and so on. The other thing that we might do now is, because we'll have more data, I might want to make this form a bit more context aware. And what I mean by that is the form we just filled out, this grade level one, I might still, part of the prerequisite for this is that there must be a school year. And I could have that information to make it look like super customized to what people are doing. Put that information like right in the copy if I wanted to. So we could say something like, create a grade level for your school year that runs from blah to blah, which is the end dates and the start date and end date of the school year. That feels a bit forced to me for school year. But when we get to the course, especially if people are leaving and saying, all right, I'll make a grade level. I don't know what course I want yet, so I'll come back to it later. So if they're on the onboarding form for a course, it would be really nice if we say, create a course for your kindergarten grade level. I just think that that would be meaningful to them and help them to connect the dots to see the continuity between, oh, a course is associated with a grade level. I get it. I hope it's clear because these people are educators and they should know that their grades, their kids have. This is not modeled based off of something I've made up. This is modeled based off of how a lot of schools operate. So that seems a little silly to like spell out to them, but just the reminder to help them know what their data is and what they're actually selecting is useful. And I guess also if they go off the beaten path and go find how to make another grade level and something else gets picked, it also would give them that context so that if they create a course, it'll tell them, oh, you're about to create a course for your 5th grade level in case it swaps that out with a different grade level model. So that's context that we can add, and I think we should. So we're going to use grade level, and we're going to add that information in, and we're going to ask for the name, but otherwise it's going to be like all of these other forms. So let's go to the course page and start filling it in. You can see it doesn't look like much change, but that's because the template is wrong. In fact, I might want to switch it to... Do I want to switch it to the school year template? No, I don't. For reasons I'll go over in a second. So let's make it look like we want, and that might be a good stopping point. I'm not sure. I don't think I want to go too far with this one. So close these out and go to the start grade level. Oh, that's why it looks the same, because it is the same. We're pointing to the same template, I think. Let's return to the core views file and the course. Yeah, we haven't even made a course template yet, so we need to change that. We're going to say start course instead. And now this will blow up because there is no template file for that name yet. Go back to the grade level course or grade level template, and we're going to take all this stuff, create a new file, call it start course HTML, paste in all of that, and the name is add a course. That's what I'm going to use this title. Add a course. And this step part should probably be course. I would guess is what I named it. And I'm going to click on this now. And yeah, it's showing the right button. So I picked the right one for my banner. We haven't changed the content yet. If you've been on earlier streams, you might recall this. If you haven't, here's what I'm doing. My first step, as well, I guess from your perspective, image on the side. Second step, image on this side. Third step, image on this side. Fourth step, can you guess? Image will go over here. So we're gonna take the 2 columns that I have and swap out exactly what's there. And so this little div comes down to here. Okay. I'm not going to change this bit yet. Yeah, we don't even have our school year. Okay. Oh, never mind. Something else. So the thing I want to do is go back to our undraw site that we've been using for this SVG art. Again, thank you to Katerina and Limpinsuni. Still gonna probably get your last name wrong, but thanks. So this is a good site to get some SVG art that's searchable, that you can change to match the colors of whatever site you're making. This art is free without restriction. It's pretty awesome that this is available. So I'm going to search for school and see if anything feels like courses to me. You can see we've already used some images here, and I'm trying to skew towards a younger feeling, like some of the images that have already been selected were this one with this child and these two children wearing backpacks, and where did the other picture go that I used? I think I did time, and it was some woman with a clock. But the images that I want to associate with school, I want to go towards younger, because I think the most likely people to want to use an application and get into something from the start are going to have younger kids. That's an assumption I'm making. I could be totally wrong if I actually get people in the app with data, but that just seems like a nice way to go. So the question is, what is a good image that I want to use? And this one looks kind of nice. But this does feel like I don't know if I want to convey that the idea behind this, if I use this as the course, is like this person doesn't know what they're doing. That's how I'm reading this, like a blank canvas. So maybe that's not the right choice. What is this? Teaching? That's a bit, almost looks like a college professor. And I don't know, that's not working for me either. And this is a bit too generic. That doesn't really connect with me for the courses. So what's a different term we might be able to use? What happens if I type course? Maybe there's enough metadata in here to get something meaningful. No, it doesn't know what I'm talking about. Judge. Okay, how about student? A teacher? Kind of thinking? And that might be a nice dynamic too, because the first one was an image of a kid. The second one was an image that focused on the teacher and dealing with a clock. Third image had kids again, so this might be a nice balance. So these aren't going to be perfect fits. I don't expect them to be. It's not like this person made these illustrations for me. So we'll go with this for now. And if I don't like it or find one that's seemingly a better fit, then we'll change it. So I'm using the eyedropper tool, which is available in DevTools, and I'm doing this to pick out the color that I have as my primary color on my app, which is 2B6CB0. So 2B6CB0. And what I love about this site is that it changes the color of the image so that the primary color in there can be matching with your actual design. So now we've got it with this person who's wearing blue, this blue sweater covering. And we'll take that as undraw teacher. I'm going to save it to my downloads directory, and we'll copy. Well, first I'll run it through my image optimization tool if there's anything to gain out of it. Yeah, it shaved off a few bytes, about 4%. And then we'll copy downloads undraw teacher, and I'm going to copy it as static files course SVG. Maybe not the best name, but I'm trying to keep it with the step more so than what it's the actual content. So we come back over here to the course template and go to the template file and change this from grade level to course. And we'll say teacher contemplating lesson plans. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it makes sense to me at the moment. And refresh. Hopefully we'll see that new teacher image. We do. So the rest of this is about fitting the text to the appropriate states for this and making sure that the forms line up and so on. And I think there is some data up here. In the previous step, I told this to center when there was in either of the empty states or the states where you're supposed to move on to the next one. So in order to make that match up, we need to say if, so the context that we're going to care about in this step is if there's a course or there's not a school year. Those are the side ones. You've already done this step is if there's a course, and you haven't done this yet is if you don't have, not a school year, a grade level. In those two states, I'm centering the content because I've got this shorter, I'm centering it this way. So I've got a shorter message because I started, actually, let's see, let's do with not course here. I think that'll do. If, oh, forget it. Just if true, will that work? Can I do this? I think I can. Oops, that's not what I want though. I want if false. I don't want to include this item center. So I had it up higher, and the message was so short that I mean, I hope you can see it visually. Like, this isn't a huge screen, but from what I can see, there's a gigantic amount of white area between, like, especially under one column, this huge block of white, and then there's a lot of white here, which we can't really do much about that part. But by adding some centering to this vertically, I felt like I added some visual, just I evened things out a little bit. I don't know how else to say that. So we're going to keep it in that state, so it'll look like this. And we'll change the forms. So we are going to this else state. And we're going to say, before you can create a course, ooh, I want to change that copy too while I'm here. I wanted to be, I did decide I wanted to have a focus on singular student, because this flow is all about making one thing at a time, and it's just most likely that you're focusing on a single student to do that. So since the steps are not actually permitting you to create multiple grade levels, I want the copy to reflect that it's about one person. So I'm going to, before I forget, go into the grade level thing and change this from students to student. Okay. So before you can create a course for your student, you must first create a grade level that can hold all of their courses. that's a nice message. And we want to say create the grade level. Create grade level. So that changes that. But we need to send it to the right URL. So right now it's pointing back 2 because it was for the previous form. So we want to change it to grade level. All right. So now it says create grade level. It's going to send us back to the previous step, which is what we want. And we're going to have to fiddle with the if clauses in order to see the other form parts right now. So let's come up to the top and we'll say if not grade level, just to put it in here first. It's a different form. And let's change this to you already created your first course. The next step is to create a task for the course. And here's where we want make your first task. Make your first task. And we need, all right, so this is going to fail, but I'm okay with it failing for a moment. We need start course task is the final URL that this is going to all go to. But because that name doesn't exist, when I refresh this, it's going to fail. I haven't created that yet. But we can rapidly create that by going to the core views file. Oops, wrong file. And taking this thing, and we'll change it to course task view. We'll go to the start URLs file, and we'll call it course task, start course task. So by doing that much, this should now work. And because I copied the template, if I actually click, well, I gotta fix the banner too. Well, let me change this and then I'll speak. Start course task. This is going to link to the course task page. I'm about to click this, and the view is going to appear identical, but the URL should change. So because it's pointing at the same template right now, so it's not doing anything, but the URL is the valid URL that I want as the final view of this. So that's done. We'll return to the actually go to the right view this time. And we've got our make your first task. You already created your first course. And all right, that's good. So then this last bit is for when they have the form. All right. So this looks strange, and it looks strange because it's being pushed over to the edge. So it's right up on the image. That doesn't feel right. So let's inspect this. Something's going on here. Although it's just kind of where that is. So maybe I want to have, I might take this particular element and give it some margin on, specifically on the right side. So that it's not, I mean, you can see how these literally are lined up. So this image that I'm using, this curve goes all the way to the edge of the SVG. So they are literally stacked on top of each other. So that doesn't feel good. So I'm going to push it over some. We'll come down to the actual area where the button stuff is, which is this. And I want to give it some margin on the right side. We'll start with 6 just to see what that looks like. It just kind of nudged it a little bit. And I think that's not what I want. Although it looks like did it also affect the paragraph stuff? Surely not. Nope, it didn't. Okay, so it just happens that the text, the body copy on these, nothing is actually going up flush to the right. All right, so a lot of this form is going to stay the same. It's in fact, the course model also uses the name of name, so none of that actually has to change except for the placeholder text. So we'll want to say, instead, we'll do, just say like math or chemistry. I don't know. Those are good subjects, I guess. But I didn't really like chemistry. My wife loved it, but I was not a fan. But that gives some examples that they can work from. Certainly chemistry does not skew towards younger kids, but that's okay. So here's our form. Still feels a bit like crammed in here. So let's come back to the school year form for a minute. I want to see what that one looks like in comparison. Start school year. And I just want to change this so we can actually see it. And I'm going to do a side-by-side. If it will load. Okay. Right off the bat, I think there's the same amount of spacing here, but this guy is taking up the full width, and so it's something. I must have changed something about this field. This feels better because the labels are going all the way to the left, and they're filling this out. Whereas this thing is like awkward and kind of shoved over some, and it just doesn't feel very good to me. So I don't know. Let's inspect these and see what I did differently between these two sides, because I don't remember what's going on. So this is MD 1/4, MD 3/4. Okay. And it's a flex in the center. All right. And what are you? Why are you so different? This is MD 1/4 and MD 3/4. But perhaps it's the containers that it's in? I can only imagine it's the container that it's in. MD flex. Let's look at the width on this is 464 for that row. And the width on this, well, it's also 464. Oh, you know what it might be? No, that can't be it. There's something else that's missing here. I think I might have... Okay, I copied... There it is. I think that... Yeah, okay. Because I've got this alternation thing going on, the container classes that are in there, they have different margins on different sides. So even though the margin was on the same side, or is the same amount, equal on different sides and pushing it different ways, one's on the left and one's on the right. And so it was on the course one, which is copied from when it's the other way, it just is making it feel like extra crammed. So I'm going to switch this back to being padding on the right. Oops. And see if that frees up this feeling. Okay. That did do the right thing in terms of spacing over here. It does add that. But then it destroyed the actual copy areas. Those don't feel right anymore. So what is this set to? I must have set those individually. They have ML10 and MB2. Okay. ML10. Okay. Oops, wrong one to refresh. So that's a little better. There's something. There's still some stuff that's off. Like these are lined up, and now these are not. I think it might be that extra margin 6 that I added to something. Where did it go? Here it is. I think the margin right 6 might have messed it up. Yeah, okay, now they're lined up again. So it's these kind of details that I think a lot of people don't really care about, but that level of pixel perfection, and I'm not a designer, so I know that my stuff is not perfect, but a certain amount of attention to detail can really set a really poorly designed app apart, and you don't even necessarily immediately notice right away unless you have been doing it for a long time. But just those little offsets and things that just doesn't hang together right will add up and be like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. So I'm probably going to continue to play with this. I'm not totally happy with the spacing, but it's definitely better than it was. And I'm not going to update the copy this time, so we'll probably end there. So what did we do today? We added a grade level form. We finished it off, added the actual tests to check it all out, made sure that the coverage on those tests was good, and we talked about how this is going to be very similar to the previous step. We need to add the context data that actually does that checking so that it knows how to show the go to the previous step or go to the next step stuff. And once those are in place, then that piece is done, and then we'll add another form like we did and carry on, and we'll get to the 5th step, and then we'll get closer and closer to wrapping this up. And at that point, then we'll have to find something else to do in the app. I should have some feedback from my spouse, who's the customer of the app by that point, so that I can have some other projects to do. So that's going to bring us to a close for the evening. Thank you for joining in. The video will go up on YouTube when I can get it up there, and you can review it at your leisure to check out anything you might have missed if you came in later. If you have any questions and you want to reach out, hit me up on Discord below, or message me on Twitter, or at mention me, whatever, and I will do my best to answer them as long as they're related to Django or Python or web development. Happy to touch on those topics. Thank you for joining in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.